Hello, fellow investor. In this video, we're going to take a look at J&J and the expectations for the upcoming earnings, which happen on Tuesday morning before the market open. That's October the 14th. I'm going to cover several topics in this video just to help set expectations for Johnson & Johnson moving forward. I'm going to review the current price chart and trend charts, along with some key valuation metrics. I'm also going to share J&J portfolio holdings and performance. So let's get started.
Johnson & Johnson is scheduled to report third quarter earnings on Tuesday, October 14th before the market open. In the previous quarter, Johnson & Johnson reported revenue of $23.74 billion, beating revenue estimates by $881.84 million. Johnson & Johnson reported earnings of $2.77 per share, beating estimates by 9 cents per share. For this quarter, the revenue estimate is $23.76 billion with earnings of $2.76 per share. Over the last 90 days, 14 analysts raised estimates and 3 analysts lowered estimates. Johnson & Johnson meets or beats analysts' one-year forward estimates 91% of the time. Johnson & Johnson is showing positive relative strength going into the earnings. The options markets is pricing an implied move of plus or minus 3.3%.
Before we jump into the charts for J&J specifically, I do need to talk about a couple of events that are ongoing that could or may affect the market, and we did see one of them drastically affect the market on Friday. But one is the government shutdown that the U.S. government is currently in, and then on Friday was the escalating trade tensions between the U.S. and China, and that really affected the markets at the Friday close. So the Dow was down 1.9%, the S&P was down 2.71%, and the Nasdaq was down 3.56%, and we also saw a pretty significant increase in the VIX, also known as the Fair Index, which jumped up 31.83%, and it did close above 20, which is a pretty significant value. So how did that affect the sectors? The consumer staples was the only sector that ended up in the green on Friday. All the remaining sectors were down. I want to focus on the healthcare sector, which was down 1.44% because that's where J&J operates. So let's take a look at the SPX in the charts. We can see this drawdown we had on Friday. It was down 2.71%, which closed below the 20-day moving average. That 20-day moving average has acted as support since we came out of the tariff announcements in April. That has been tested a few times, but we broke down pretty significantly below that value and are actually close to the 50-day moving average. On March 10th, we had a drawdown of a similar magnitude of 2.7%. And then on April the 3rd, we had a drawdown of 4.84%. On April the 4th, we had a drawdown of 5.97%. So that gives you some idea of what to expect when these tariff announcements come in and the trade tensions increase between countries. So let's look at J&J specific chart. So they closed down 0.19%, and that's compared to the healthcare sector, which was down 1.4%, and the S&P 500, which was down 2.71% on Friday. So J&J actually held up pretty well given the increased trade tensions that happened on Friday. J&J is trading above an upward sloping 20-day, an upward sloping 50-day, and an upward sloping 200-day moving average. The RSI is currently at 76, which indicates an overbought condition, but it is showing good relative strength moving into the earnings. The PPO is positive. The accumulation is strong and showing we're at a near 52-week high. We did decrease a little bit on Friday. The money flow is positive, showing strength. J&J has outperformed the S&P 500 by 8.20%. It's outperformed the healthcare sector by 29.55%. It's outperformed the pharmaceutical industry by 29.94%, while that industry overall has underperformed the S&P 500 by 16.73%. So overall, J&J is showing good, positive relative strength moving into the earnings. I want to share two additional charts on J&J that were pretty exciting. One is this 3-year range breakout. So basically from March of 2022 all the way through July of 2025, so basically 3 years, J&J traded in a range between highs of about 168 down to 135, 136. But in July of this year, it actually broke out of that 3-year trading range. So that was a pretty exciting chart to see. And then one other chart that I'm going to share is beginning 2025 January, we did see a big run up. Then we saw a pullback and came back to that level. That basically formed the cup of a cup and handle formation or pattern. And then we got the handle. And when that happens, you can basically measure down from the right rim of that cup, which was at about 166, 167. You can measure down to 148 and get the difference, and then add that to this 168 price, which gave me a price target of 193. We have come very close to that level. We reached a high of about 192.10, and even after the escalation of the trade tensions, we closed at 190.7. So we were only just $1 or so away from that price range after I identified this cup with handle several weeks ago. Looking at the J&J weekly trend chart, which matches 3 sets of moving averages. The top is a longer term moving averages, 21 and 34 weeks. And then the midterm averages, which are set to 5 and 13 weeks. And then the short term, which is set to 1 to 5 weeks. But the interesting thing we see here is J&J is very positive in all 3 of those ranges. So in the short, midterm, and long term, J&J is the price is trading well above all of those averages. When we look at the valuation growth and profitability metrics for J&J from Seeking Alpha, we can see that J&J is currently trading at a forward PE of 17.59 times. The median for the sector is 18.22 times. So J&J is trading at a slightly better valuation compared to the sector. When we look at the EPS growth rate and revenue growth rate, the revenue growth rate for J&J is 3.77% compared to 7.99% for the sector. And the J&J EPS expected growth rate is 4.67% compared to the sector median at 7.87%. Then when we turn to profitability, we can see that J&J has a net margin of 25%, while the sector median is 0.32%. So J&J is much more profitable than the sector overall. We'll look at J&J in fast graphs. We can see that J&J is currently trading at a blended PE of 17.9 times. They have an EPS yield of 5.59%. They have a dividend yield of 2.73% with an average growth rate over 5 years of 5.32%. Over this 20-year time frame, we can see that J&J has grown on average 6.14% per year. They have a fair value ratio calculated by fast graphs at 15 times, and their normal PE that the market applies to J&J is 16.26 times. The normal PE is indicated by the blue line, so that's the market multiple, and the fair value is calculated by fast graphs as this orange line. So we can see that J&J is currently trading above both its normal PE and fair value. This generally indicates that it's overpriced at the moment, so I'm not necessarily adding any more to J&J at this point, unless due to these tariff announcements and a pullback in the S&P 500, if it drops down below it's a normal multiple or fair value, I'll be sure to pick up some more shares. If we look at their earnings history, we can see that J&J has mostly had expanding EPS over this 20-year time frame. They did have 2 years where they had a contraction in their earnings. 2024 was actually pretty low. 2025 is still expected to grow by 9%, and 2026 and 2027 is expected to grow 5% and 8%. I have a blended valuation on Johnson & Johnson of about $163 per share, and FastGraphs is calculating that price to be fair value at $162, so I'm within about $1 on my personal valuation of J&J as compared to FastGraphs. I first entered J&J in July of 2023. My average cost per share is $157.27. At the time of this recording, the share appreciation is 21.3%. Dividends have contributed 4.8%. Options have added 0.9% for a total return of 26.9%, or 17.9% annualized. At my previous report, 10 of the entry points were positive with 7 losing trades, but today all 17 entry points are profitable on J&J. If you find these earnings previews helpful, I would appreciate you subscribing to the channel so you are alerted to future videos as they get posted. I would also be grateful if you liked the video to help support this channel. I wish you the best in your investment journey and remember to trade well.